I'm Eric Smith, Associate Editor of Modern Distribution Management. Today I'm speaking with Justin Craig, PhD, Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship at Northeastern University. Dr. Craig's research focuses on entrepreneurial, multi-generational family enterprises and those responsible for their stewardship. He is an Associate Editor at the Family Business Journal, Family Business Review, and a member of the editorial board of Journal of Family Business Strategy. In addition to these two journals, his research has appeared in Journal of Business Venturing, Entrepreneurship, Theory and Practice, Journal of World Business, Journal of Business Research, Journal of Small Business Management, Small Business Economics, and Journal of Business Ethics, among others. In today's executive briefing, Succession Planning for Family Businesses, Justin will discuss how critical it is for companies to groom the next generation of leaders to take over, how they can achieve this, and what challenges they will face. Thanks for joining us today, Justin.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity.
Well, let's launch right into this. With the looming retirement of many baby boomers, are you seeing the need for succession planning among family businesses increase?
Yes, I suppose the quick answer is yes, but I do feel there's a misnomer at times when we see this hit the popular press, because oftentimes it's as a result of a survey going out, and the simple yes/no question on the survey is, do you have a succession plan? And many of the respondents, it's my understanding, will either say yes or no, and that'll make the headlines, if you like. But in real terms, I think that the insightful leaders, they're not successful and they haven't stayed in business because they don't address, or they're very good at what they do. And this is one of the things that they do well. But they probably don't talk about it as much because, being a private family business, there's no need, as there is in the public sector or the publicly traded sector, to have these conversations in an open forum. But to the question of whether, because of the baby boomer generation, there will be an increase in succession planning conversations, yes, I'm sure there will be, and I'm sure that there'll be many who through this process, and many who equally are challenged to address it because it's something they don't do very often. They haven't had to do before.
Certainly, many family-owned businesses have a kind of a second or third generation in line to take over. For those that do, and also for those that don't, what are some ways that family-owned businesses should kind of begin preparing for succession, for grooming that next or second or even third generation to take over the company?
Yeah, well, a lot of the research that we do these days has come up with, well, let's call them guidelines rather than best practice. And these guidelines include, for the next generation, to get exposure outside of the business. So rather than finish typically at university or some sort of trade school or some sort of further education after high school, not to rush back into the business straight away. The term I like to use is, a father says to his son or daughter, go out and make some mistakes on other people's money. Go out there and learn discipline, learn from other people, learn what's happening out there, and work for another boss before you come back and work in the business. And that's what most companies or most leaders and patriarchs and matriarchs are challenging their next generation to do, which is, I see it over and over again in my classes here at Northeastern and other places that I've taught. There is an increasing an awareness of the need to do that because it's a changing economy. The challenges are different. Running a company now is different to what it was 10 years ago. There's a global market. There's opportunities everywhere. So these next generation leaders are looking outside before they're coming back inside, and they're bringing that knowledge back in to effectively continue differently. And increasingly, these companies are not only just suggesting that their next generation do this, they're requiring it. That a lot of my students know that they don't get a job automatically back in the business. They are expected to go out, get a job elsewhere, do well at that job, get promoted, demonstrate to objective appraisers that they are good operators, or they're potentially good managers or good executives, and then they come back and compete back in the company for jobs that back in their own company, but for positions. And there's obviously many benefits for doing that. They build their confidence, they build their legitimacy as managers or leaders, they get outside experience, they get ideas, they get networks. But as well as that, they in the eyes of many stakeholders, including financiers, they build confidence in the next generation that they will continue to be supported by the financial institutions. Long-term employees look at these next generation as being competent leaders because they've proved themselves in an open forum. Suppliers, customers, all of these stakeholders are looking quite with interest at how the next generation prepared for a role in the business and potentially, eventually, a leadership role in the business. So there's more to the science than, or more to the process than ever before. That we're not leaving this to chance. The company needs a competent leader, needs competent management, and we'd like to think that we're preparing the next generation for that significant role that they will have to play in a timely fashion, in a structured fashion. So there's a lot going on as far as preparation goes for the next generation, and the insightful leaders are having that conversation early. They're sharing information. They're working with researchers like myself and others around the world who are studying the transition process. And I'll just throw in there that I do say transition rather than succession. It's a word that's overused, and we jump on the bandwagon and say succession is a problem in family businesses, but it's also an opportunity. So I like to spin it a little bit and say, yes, there's transition there, but there's an opportunity here for the next generation to continue differently, to transition the business maybe from one industry to another, maybe from one product line, technology, et cetera, while keeping the values and the core competencies that have been built up, and sometimes over generations, by the incumbents.
In industrial distribution and manufacturing, oftentimes there isn't a second or third generation that is either willing or able to kind of transition into that next leadership role. What are some things that family businesses can do if there isn't a descendant to take over the family business? Do they need to, as you said, consider transitioning to different core businesses, or perhaps even been looking outside the family for that transition?
Well, that's a good point, Eric. And I think the key thing to remember there, or to consider there, that a role in the business doesn't necessarily have to be an operational role. There are potentially better professional managers who can succeed or fulfill that role better than somebody who is not necessarily as committed. An important stakeholder group now is the professional manager. And by that I mean by that person who makes their living as a manager. In my classes, I note that if I have a class of 40, there'll be 30 from family businesses and 10 who are not from family businesses. And these are the guys, the young men and women who the family business community need to help them grow their business, help them sustain their business, help them to direct their business, and potentially to lead their business. Getting back to that core question is, what happens if there's not somebody willing and able? Well, the signaling needs to be that you don't have to have an operational role. If you don't see yourself in a supply chain or a distribution role, that's okay. There are other ways that you can contribute to this legacy or this organisation. And that could be in a role as a director. It could be a role in some sort of a different capacity, while we hand over the reins, if you like, or the day-to-day operation to somebody who is trained, more committed, And we pay those people well, and they do get paid well to actually deliver in a values-driven environment that is an alternate career path to corporate model that some see as more attractive in contributing to a company that has a strong legacy, a long legacy, and that is committed to continuing on. And we can continue that and effectively be part of a family without being a family member. And I think there is a move, or I've noticed a move to some good or very good or well-trained managers looking for alternative career paths in the privately family-controlled sector. So the message or the signalling is there that says, well, don't let it stress you that, that you have to have an operational role. There are other ways that we contribute. And that also takes careful planning. If it isn't going to be, or you're not ready at this point in time, maybe we do need to consider professional management. Maybe that will help us tidy up our structures. Can we bring somebody in who's had more exposure to a different business model or a different ownership structure? And how can they actually assist us in plight or our strategy to move forward across generations? And most of these families that we see, the bigger name families or the iconic brands, they do rely very, very heavily on external to the family directors, external to the family executives to lead at different points over the lifespan of those companies. And we can learn from them and look at that. Well, maybe that's an option. It's a pretty big task for someone to say, well, gosh, I'm not going to hand it over to someone who's not a family member. But in reality, it could be something that needs to be considered. But it needs to be considered carefully, because to attract those good managers or those well-qualified managers, it needs to be a professionally run organisation with transparency, independence and accountability. And that's where good governance comes in, and that may need some behavioural changes in some instances to bring in good corporate governance.
Could you talk a little bit about what the Balanced Scorecard is and how it could help family businesses as they think about their transition from one generation to the next, or perhaps even to outside leadership or operational roles?
Sure. The Balanced Scorecard was introduced by Kaplan and Norton to Harvard Business School professors in the early to mid-90s, I believe. I stumbled across it by chance, working with my mentor who was using it to, at that point in time, operate the university in Australia where we're at, Bond University. And he was an accounting professor, and he looked at, obviously, management and measurement. He was a management accountant. And I had no clue, because my background was not in accounting. And I looked at it and I said, this makes so much sense. And it's a practical tool, and that's what it is. It's a management and measurement tool. But importantly, what it does, it aligns the day-to-day operations and the objectives, measures and targets with the agreed-upon strategy, and puts it in an easily-to-digest document that can be translated or digested by family and non-family members who are involved in the business at varying degrees. The thing that I like about it, and as a teaching tool and as something to make people aware of its benefits, is that it looks at not only financial metrics, it looks at three other dimensions. The other dimensions are the customer perspective, the innovation and learning perspective, and the internal processes. So if you look at those three, as well as the financial perspective, you'll get to why they call it the Balanced Scorecard. It looks at different important agenda items and keeps the company and the conversation on track, as these are all aligned to the strategy. The tricky thing is that when we've looked at it and published using it, we have adopted or adapted the family business dimension or dynamic to this. When you've got a financial perspective from a normal business operating agenda, you then actually overlay that or integrate that with the family. And there are some obvious nuances there that would not surface in a normal business or normal publicly traded company when you're only just focusing on the business. Similarly with the customer perspective, the customer may value the fact that it is a family-owned business and a values-driven business. Stakeholders or people who are working with the scorecard, the management and measurement tool, need to identify that, and if it is a point of leverage or a point of distinction, to make sure that that is kept on the agenda and it's monitored, the most is made out of that particular customer relationship or other relationships. And similar with the other two. But the other thing to consider with the balanced scorecard, that it doesn't only look at lag effects, it looks at lead effects. So what I mean there by typically when you look at your performance does have a lag because you're getting your numbers from the previous period or the previous month. There's not much you can do about something that happened on the first of the previous month, and you've got your figures in the second week of the following month. So the lead indicators, what's happening in the industry, what's happening, with interest rates, what's happening with the customer demographic. Is there something we should be alerted to? Is something we should be looking at and make sure that we act in a timely fashion before it's too late? So balanced scorecard with a family dimension is a valuable tool. It's a management tool. It's a measurement tool, helps you keep track, as they say in the accounting field, what matters gets measured. So we actually start to drill down to find out what is important, how we're going to measure that and how we're going to monitor that and make sure that the stakeholders are alert to the fact that we are on track, or if we aren't on track, that we can actually do something about it before it's too late. I recommend having a conversation about any measurement and management tool, whether it is a balanced scorecard or something similar, and there are other options available.
Any last thoughts for family businesses as they begin to think about succession planning or transitioning?
One of the things I like to actually encourage, Eric, for the next generation is to make sure that the next generation get profit responsibility. So not only budget responsibility, because managing a budget, is quite. A leader is responsible for delivering profits. The CEO is responsible for delivering profits. So ways that they can actually prepare for that, they need to deliver profits or have a profit responsibility as part of their apprenticeship. So they can look at ways to be entrepreneurial, to be innovative, to make sure that they understand what it means to deliver profit rather than just manage a budget. I think that's a good way to make sure that they know the challenges that they will face ultimately if they are the one called upon to lead the business. So some way in there, whether that's outside the business, whether it's starting a business of their own or some venture, or within the organisation even, you just don't deliver on budget, on time, etc., etc. Let's give you some profit responsibility. Let's make sure you've got some scars to understand how challenging it is, increasingly challenging to do that. The other thing to consider is to communicate early and often with stakeholders. If I listed them down there briefly before, the financiers, if you talk to any bank manager, that's one of the things that they will say, what's happening as far as the next generation. Because all we're about here is minimising risk. We look at customers to make sure that those customers know that these relationships that we've built up with the current generation are not in jeopardy, as well as suppliers. All of these things here. So if you list them down and understand how there's a lot of signalling going on to say, well, here the next generation are being prepared, are capable individuals or collective if it's a joint CEO position or cousins that are being prepared. So this organisation is only going to, not only going to continue, but it's going to continue and go from what it is to potentially even better horizons abroad because there's new energy coming in, accompanying these next generation leaders. The other thing to stress is that surround yourselves with constructive critics. Most of these companies who do it right have external non-family directors on their boards. They make sure that they ask this question often about the next generation preparedness. And they are there to be objective, to make sure there's not a reliance on the founder or the long-term leader. So these governance structures from a business perspective are mimicking the professional structure or the professional business governance or corporate governance. But equally as important that the family governance is in place, that there are forums in place to understand and communicate and educate the next generation of their rights and responsibilities, whether they are going to take an operational role or just be informed owners, because at some point in time that they will be owners. So family governance and business governance are equally as important. and need to be addressed, or conversations need to be had about bringing in appropriate governance structures that the company will need as it goes forward into the next generation, as well as managing day-to-day operations in the current challenging environment.
Well, Justin, that is some great insight and advice for our listeners, and really thank you for joining us today.
No, thanks for the opportunity, Eric, and I wish everybody well as they put this important topic on their agenda item. Thank you.
For more information on succession planning, see the February 10th and February 25th issues of Modern Distribution Management's premium newsletters. To reach Dr. Craig, contact him at the number and email listed.